A black truck driver named Marcus was unjustly fired for no reason by the new fleet manager at the trucking company where he had worked for years. 6 months later, Marcus returns to the company, and something incredible happens that leaves everybody speechless. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Marcus Hayes, a skilled and passionate black truck driver, sat behind the wheel of his truck, his dark hands gripping the steering wheel with practiced confidence. The hum of the engine surrounded him, but Marcus was in his element, completely focused on the road ahead. The familiar smell of diesel fuel filled the air, making Marcus smile to himself, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. This was where he belonged. "Marcus," called out a fellow driver, Sophie. "That delivery you made yesterday was incredible. You've outdone yourself again." Marcus looked up, his warm brown eyes crinkling at the corners. "Thanks, Sophie, but remember, it's a team effort. We all make the magic happen together." As he spoke, Marcus's mind drifted to his ultimate dream, owning his own trucking business. He imagined a fleet of trucks with his name on the side, driven by a team that he personally trained. The thought made his chest swell with hope and determination. Just then, the garage door swung open, and Mr. Beaumont, a regular client, poked his head in. His face lit up when he saw Marcus. "There he is," he exclaimed, the wizard of logistics himself. "Marcus, my friend, that last shipment was perfect. I had to come back and tell you in person." Marcus felt his cheeks grow warm at the praise. "Thank you, Mr. Beaumont. I'm so glad you were satisfied." As Mr. Beaumont chatted with him, Marcus couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. This was why he loved trucking. The joy it brought to people, the way it could touch lives through hard work and dedication. When Mr. Beaumont left, Marcus turned back to his truck, his mind whirling with new ideas for routes and services. He picked up a clipboard, feeling its weight in his hand, and began to plan with care. One day, he thought to himself, "I'll have a company of my own." The dream felt so close he could almost touch it, as real and vibrant as the landscapes he drove through every day. But the atmosphere in the trucking company shifted dramatically with the arrival of Mr. Huxley, the new fleet manager and part owner. His polished shoes clicked against the concrete floor as he strode in, his crisp white shirt a stark contrast to his cold demeanor. Marcus stood tall, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and nervousness. He had completed a long-haul delivery, hoping to make a good first impression on the new boss. "Mr. Huxley," Marcus said, extending his hand, "I'm Marcus Hayes. It's a pleasure to meet you." Mr. Huxley's eyes swept over Marcus, his gaze lingering on Marcus's dark skin before settling on the clipboard in front of him. He ignored Marcus's outstretched hand. "What's this?" Mr. Huxley asked, his voice clipped and dismissive. Marcus swallowed hard, trying to keep his smile in place. "This is the delivery log, sir, with all the details of the route and timing. I thought you might like to review it." Mr. Huxley's lip curled slightly. "I see. Well, Mr. Hayes, I'm not here to review your experimental routes. This company is known for its efficiency, and that's how it will stay." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He watched as Mr. Huxley turned away without even glancing at the log, addressing the rest of the team about his plans for the company. Marcus stood there, his carefully prepared log sheet growing cold in his hands. The excitement he had felt just moments ago faded, replaced by a sinking feeling in his stomach. He couldn't help but wonder if Mr. Huxley's dismissal was about more than just the job. As the other drivers listened to Mr. Huxley's speech about tradition and efficiency, Marcus quietly disposed of his untouched log. He tried to focus on Mr. Huxley's words, but his mind kept drifting back to the cold look in the new manager's eyes. For the first time since he started working at the company, Marcus felt out of place in the industry he had come to love. In the days following Mr. Huxley's arrival, the atmosphere in the trucking company began to change. It was subtle at first, but Marcus couldn't help noticing the shifts in his schedule. He found himself assigned to less lucrative routes, away from the high-profile jobs he was used to. One afternoon, as Marcus prepared for a long-haul delivery, he overheard Mr. Huxley speaking to another manager. "We need to focus on traditional routes," Mr. Huxley said. "No more of this experimental nonsense." Marcus's heart sank, but he kept his head down and continued working. He tried to offer suggestions during route planning, but Mr. Huxley would cut him off or simply ignore his input. "Marcus," said Sarah, one of the dispatchers, as they wrapped up after a shift, "have you noticed how Mr. Huxley's been treating you lately?" Marcus paused, a lump forming in his throat. "I'm sure it's nothing," he said, forcing a smile. "He's just settling in, you know." Sarah frowned. "It doesn't seem right. You're one of our best drivers." "Thanks, Sarah," Marcus replied, touched by her concern. "But don't worry about me. I'm sure things will work out." As the weeks passed, more of Marcus's colleagues expressed their worry. They saw how Mr. Huxley dismissed Marcus's ideas and kept him away from the most important routes. Despite the growing unease in his stomach, Marcus tried to stay positive. He threw himself into his work, making every delivery with care and dedication, even if it was just a short local run. "My work will speak for itself," Marcus told himself each morning as he climbed into his truck. "I just need to keep doing my best." But as he watched Mr. Huxley praise other drivers for jobs that were far less challenging than his own, Marcus couldn't help but wonder how long he could keep his optimism alive. The bustling trucking yard was in full swing, the sound of engines roaring as trucks were loaded for the day's deliveries. Marcus was at his station, carefully preparing for his next route, a particularly challenging delivery that required navigating through a tricky part of the city. As he put the finishing touches on his route plan, Mr. Huxley approached, his eyes narrowed as he inspected Marcus's work. "What is this?" Mr. Huxley demanded, his voice cutting through the noise of the yard. Marcus stood tall, pride evident in his voice. "It's my plan for the delivery route, sir. The clients love it." Mr. Huxley's face twisted in disgust. "This is not a proper delivery plan. This is an abomination." The yard fell silent, all eyes turning to Marcus and Mr. Huxley. "But sir," Marcus began, his voice steady despite the hurt building in his chest, "I've been using this route for years. It's one of our most efficient." "I don't care how efficient it is," Mr. Huxley interrupted, his voice rising. "This is not how we operate at this company. We stick to tried and true methods, not this experimental nonsense." Marcus felt his face grow hot as Mr. Huxley continued to berate him in front of the entire team. He noticed the pitying looks from his colleagues, the shocked expressions on the newer staff members' faces. As Mr. Huxley's tirade went on, Marcus began to see beyond the words. He noticed the way Mr. Huxley's eyes never quite met his, how his gestures seemed exaggerated, almost performative. It was as if Mr. Huxley was putting on a show. But for whom? Suddenly, a realization hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about the job. Mr. Huxley's actions, his constant dismissal of Marcus's ideas, the way he had been slowly pushing Marcus to the sidelines. It all pointed to something deeper, something Marcus had hoped he wouldn't have to face in the industry he had come to love. As Mr. Huxley stormed away, leaving Marcus standing alone with his abomination of a route plan, Marcus felt a mix of emotions wash over him. Anger, hurt, and disappointment swirled in his chest. But beneath it all, a determination began to burn. He wouldn't let Mr. Huxley's prejudices define him or his career. That night, Marcus returned home, his shoulders slumped and his eyes heavy with worry. As he walked through the door, the comforting aroma of Angela's homemade stew filled the air, but even the promise of his favorite meal couldn't lift his spirits. Angela emerged from the kitchen, her warm smile fading as she saw the distress on her husband's face. "Marcus, what's wrong?" she asked, concern etching her features. Marcus sank into a chair at the dining table, running a hand over his face. "It's Mr. Huxley," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Things are getting worse at the company." Angela sat beside him, taking his hand in hers. "Tell me everything," she urged gently. With a deep sigh, Marcus recounted the events of the day, Mr. Huxley's public humiliation, the shocked faces of his co-workers, the growing tension in the company. As he spoke, his voice trembled with a mix of anger and hurt. I think it's because I'm black, Angela," Marcus finally admitted, his eyes meeting hers. "I'm the only black driver there, and Mr. Huxley, he treats me differently. It's like he's looking for reasons to push me out." Angela's grip on his hand tightened, her eyes shining with empathy and fierce protectiveness. "Oh, Marcus," she said softly, I'm so sorry you're going through this. But you listen to me, she continued, her voice growing stronger. You are incredible, talented. Your work is amazing, and you have every right to be in that company. Marcus nodded, drawing strength from his wife's words. I know, but sometimes I wonder if it's worth the fight. It is, Angela insisted. You've worked so hard to get where you are. Don't let Mr. Huxley's prejudices take that away from you. She cupped his face in her hands, her eyes locked on his. You are strong, Marcus Hayes. You're not just a great truck driver. You're a good man with a beautiful heart. That's worth more than any job title. A small smile tugged at Marcus's lips. What would I do without you? He murmured. Angela leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to his forehead. You'll never have to find out. We're in this together, remember? Now let's eat some stew and figure out how we're going to show Mr. Huxley just how wrong he is. As they settled in for dinner, Marcus felt a renewed sense of determination. With Angela by his side, he knew he could face whatever challenges lay ahead at the trucking company. As the days passed, Mr. Huxley's treatment of Marcus grew increasingly overt. The tension in the trucking company thickened like an over-reduced sauce, cloying and uncomfortable. One morning, Marcus arrived at work to find the other drivers huddled around Mr. Huxley, deep in discussion about the upcoming week's deliveries. As Marcus approached, the conversation abruptly halted, and Mr. Huxley's cold eyes flickered over Marcus before he turned back to the group. As I was saying, Mr. Huxley continued, pointedly ignoring Marcus. We'll be focusing on traditional routes next week. I've already assigned the deliveries to each of you. Marcus cleared his throat. Excuse me, Mr. Huxley. What would you like me to deliver? Mr. Huxley's lip curled slightly. Oh, Marcus, I didn't see you there. You can continue with your usual routes. We won't be needing any of your creative input for this schedule. The words stung like salt in a wound. Marcus looked around at his colleagues, hoping to find a friendly face or a hint of support. Instead, he was met with averted gazes and uncomfortable shuffling. As the days wore on, Marcus found himself increasingly isolated. Important meetings about new routes or key clients always seemed to happen when he wasn't around. His suggestions were dismissed without consideration, and his expertise ignored. What hurt even more was the growing distance between Marcus and his fellow drivers. People he had once considered friends now barely met his eyes. Conversations would stop when he entered the break room, only to resume in hushed tones once he left. One afternoon, Marcus overheard two of his colleagues whispering in the storage room. I feel bad for Marcus, one said. But what can we do? If we stick up for him, we might be next on Mr. Huxley's chopping block. I know, the other replied, sighing heavily. It's not right, but I can't risk losing this job. I've got a family to support. Marcus quietly stepped away, his heart heavy. He understood their fear, but the realization that he was now alone in this fight weighed on him like a lead apron. The day of a high-profile delivery arrived, and the trucking yard buzzed with excitement. The company had secured a major contract with a prestigious client, and it was the perfect opportunity for Marcus to showcase his skills. But Mr. Huxley had other plans. As the drivers gathered for their pre-route meeting, Mr. Huxley doled out assignments. Pierre, you'll be handling the luxury goods delivery. Sarah, the electronics shipment is yours. And Marcus, Mr. Huxley paused, his eyes gleaming with barely concealed disdain. You'll be on maintenance duty and truck inspections tonight. Marcus felt as if he'd been slapped. Maintenance duty on one of the most important nights of the year? He opened his mouth to protest, but Mr. Huxley had already moved on, discussing the evening's special deliveries, many of which Marcus had helped secure. With a heavy heart, Marcus took his place at the maintenance station. As he checked the trucks for safety, he could hear the excited chatter of the other drivers as they prepared for their deliveries. The hum of engines and the smell of fuel were a cruel reminder of what he was missing. Throughout the night, Marcus watched as Mr. Huxley paraded through the yard, accepting compliments for deliveries that Marcus had helped plan. The precision driving and careful handling of delicate goods. Oh yes, a personal touch from Mr. Huxley, he boasted to the client, conveniently forgetting that it was Marcus who had first suggested the routes. Despite the injustice of it all, Marcus continued his work diligently. He made sure every truck was in top condition, every tire perfectly inflated. Even in this menial role, He was determined to maintain his dignity and professionalism. As the night wore on, Marcus's frustration grew, but so did his resolve. He might be relegated to the background for now, but he knew his worth. He refused to let Mr. Huxley's actions diminish his passion for trucking or his dreams of owning his own company someday. The next day, Marcus arrived at the trucking company early, his heart heavy but his resolve strong. He knew he couldn't let Mr. Huxley's unfair treatment continue any longer. As the team bustled about preparing for the day ahead, Marcus took a deep breath and approached Mr. Huxley. "Mr. Huxley, may I have a word with you?" Marcus asked, his voice steady despite the nervousness churning in his stomach. Mr. Huxley turned, his eyebrows raised in surprise. "What is it, Marcus? We're quite busy, as you can see." Marcus stood his ground. "I think it's important we discuss this now, sir." The yard suddenly grew quiet, the staff sensing the tension in the air. All eyes turned to Marcus and Mr. Huxley. "Very well," Mr. Huxley said, his tone clipped. "Speak your mind." Marcus took another deep breath. "Mr. Huxley, I've been noticing a pattern in how I'm being treated here. I believe I'm facing discrimination because of my race." A collective gasp echoed through the yard. Mr. Huxley's face reddened, his eyes narrowing. "That's a very serious accusation, Marcus. What makes you think that?" "You've consistently undermined my work, sir," Marcus explained, his voice growing stronger. "You've relegated me to less important tasks, ignored my input, and even taken credit for my routes. I can't help but notice I'm the only black driver here and the only one receiving this treatment." The staff exchanged uncomfortable glances. Some nodded in agreement, while others looked away, ashamed they hadn't spoken up sooner. Mr. Huxley's face contorted with anger. "How dare you make such claims? I've done nothing but maintain the high standards of this company. If you can't handle the pressure, perhaps you're not cut out for this job." Marcus stood tall, unflinching in the face of Mr. Huxley's fury. "I can handle the pressure, sir. What I can't handle is unfair treatment. I'm a skilled driver, and I deserve the same respect and opportunities as everyone else here." The tension in the yard was palpable. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see how this confrontation would unfold. Mr. Huxley's face turned an even deeper shade of red as he glared at Marcus. The staff watched in stunned silence, the air thick with tension. "That's enough," Mr. Huxley bellowed, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "I will not stand here and be accused of discrimination in my own company. You're fired. Pack your things and get out of my yard immediately." A collective gasp rippled through the staff. Marcus felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach, the shock of the sudden dismissal leaving him momentarily speechless. "You can't do that," one of the mechanics whispered, but Mr. Huxley silenced him with a sharp look. Marcus took a deep breath, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. He looked around at his colleagues, some of whom avoided his gaze, while others looked on with sympathy. "Very well," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. He slowly untied his work jacket and placed it on the hood of his truck. With as much dignity as he could muster, he walked to his locker to gather his personal belongings. The yard remained eerily quiet as Marcus collected his things. He could feel the weight of everyone's stares on his back. As he turned to leave, he caught sight of the clipboard he had been working on earlier, a testament to his passion and skill, now abandoned. With one last look at the place that had been his second home for years, Marcus walked out of the yard, the heavy gate clanging shut behind him with a final thud. As Marcus stepped out into the crisp morning air, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. His career at the trucking company was over. The job he had poured his heart and soul into was gone in an instant. Thoughts raced through his mind as he walked to his car. How would he support Angela and their children? What would he tell them? Where would he go from here? Marcus stood outside yet another trucking company, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The no hiring sign in the window mocked him, a stark reminder of his countless rejections over the past few weeks. He sighed deeply, his driver's resume clutched tight in his hand. "This can't be happening," he muttered to himself, his voice barely audible above the bustling city street. As Marcus walked home, his mind raced with worry. Bills were piling up, and Angela had been so supportive, but he could see the concern in her eyes. He needed to find work and fast. The next morning, Marcus found himself staring at a small diner on the corner of their street. The faded help wanted sign in the window seemed to beckon him. With a heavy heart, he pushed open the door. "You're overqualified," the diner owner, a kind-faced woman named Betty, told him after glancing at his resume. "But if you want the job, it's yours." Marcus swallowed his pride and nodded. "I'll take it. Thank you." The following week, Marcus found himself flipping burgers and making simple sandwiches. The work was a far cry from the complex logistics he used to manage, but he threw himself into it with determination. "Order up," he called, sliding a plate of eggs and bacon across the counter. The customer, a regular named Joe, took a bite and smiled. "Best eggs I've had here in years," Joe said, giving Marcus a thumbs up. Despite the compliment, Marcus felt a pang in his heart. He missed the complexity and challenge of his previous work. During his breaks, he'd scribble down route plans and ideas in a small notebook, determined to keep his skills sharp. One quiet afternoon, Betty caught Marcus sketching out a new delivery route on a napkin. "That looks interesting," she said, her eyes wide with surprise. Marcus smiled sheepishly. "Just trying something new." As he worked on his ideas, Marcus felt a familiar spark of passion ignite within him. He might be working in a small diner now, but his love for trucking was far from extinguished. He was determined to find his way back to the industry, no matter how long it took. Marcus wiped down the counter at the diner, lost in thought about his next shift. The bell above the door chimed, and he looked up to see a woman in her mid-40s enter, her eyes scanning the room. "Can I help you?" Marcus asked politely. The woman's face lit up. "Are you Marcus Hayes?" Surprised, Marcus nodded. "Yes, that's me. I'm Sarah from the Oakwood Community Center," she said, extending her hand. "I've heard wonderful things about your work." Marcus shook her hand, a mix of curiosity and caution in his eyes. "Thank you. What can I do for you?" Sarah smiled warmly. "We're organizing a charity event next month to raise funds for our after-school programs. We'd love for you to participate." Marcus's heart skipped a beat at the mention of the event, but doubt quickly crept in. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure I'm the right person for this." "Nonsense," Sarah insisted. "Your reputation precedes you. Having you there would really draw attention to our cause." Marcus hesitated, his mind racing with conflicting emotions. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," Sarah replied, handing him a flyer. "Please do. We'd be honored to have you." That evening, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, staring at the flyer. Angela noticed his distraction and sat beside him. "What's on your mind, honey?" she asked gently. Marcus sighed and explained about the invitation. "I don't know if I should do it. What if I'm not good enough anymore?" Angela took his hand, her eyes filled with love and encouragement. "Marcus, your talent didn't disappear just because you're working at a diner. This could be a great opportunity." "But what if?" Marcus began. "No what-ifs," Angela interrupted. "You're an amazing driver, and this is your chance to remind everyone, including yourself, of that fact." Marcus felt a small smile tugging at his lips. "You really think I should do it?" "Absolutely," Angela affirmed. "And I'll be there cheering you on every step of the way." The next day, Marcus's friend and former colleague Tom stopped by the diner for lunch. When Marcus mentioned the charity event, Tom's eyes lit up. "Man, you've got to do it," Tom exclaimed. "Show everyone what they're missing out on." Marcus felt a familiar excitement building in his chest. The thought of taking on a new challenge of sharing his passion with others was becoming more and more appealing. "You know what?" Marcus said, newfound determination in his voice. "I think I will." Marcus stood in his small kitchen at home, surrounded by an array of route maps and delivery schedules. The countertops were cluttered with papers, pens, and various highlighters. He took a deep breath, inhaling the familiar scent of fresh paper and ink that had always brought him comfort. As he began to plan the new route, Marcus felt a spark of excitement he hadn't experienced in months. The rhythmic sound of the pen on paper was like music to his ears, and he found himself humming softly, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Marcus's mind wandered to the first route he had ever planned. He remembered the complex logistics and the way he had to carefully consider every detail. Inspired, he decided to create a new route that honored his past experiences while adding his own modern twist. Hours flew by, as Marcus experimented with different combinations of routes and strategies. He reviewed, adjusted, and refined his plan. The kitchen filled with the sound of his pen scratching on paper, and Angela peeked in curiously. "Smells like something special is happening in here," she said, her eyes twinkling with joy at seeing her husband so engrossed in his passion once again. Marcus looked up, beaming. "I think I've got something special here, Angie. Want to take a look?" As Angela reviewed the route, her eyes widened. "Oh, Marcus," she breathed. "This is incredible." Her reaction filled Marcus with a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. He realized how much he'd missed this feeling, the satisfaction of creating something truly unique, of sharing his expertise with others. Over the next few days, Marcus continued to practice and refine his route plan. He'd wake up early, jotting down ideas that came to him in his dreams. During his shifts at the diner, he'd scribble notes on napkins, eager to try out new strategies when he got home. With each passing day, Marcus felt his confidence growing. The doubt that had plagued him since losing his job at the trucking company began to fade. In its place, a renewed sense of purpose took root. As he stood in his kitchen, putting the finishing touches on his plan, Marcus realized something profound. Trucking wasn't just his job, it was a part of who he was. No matter where life took him, this passion would always be there, waiting to be rekindled. The day of the charity event finally arrived. Marcus woke up early, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nerves. He carefully packed his materials and equipment, double-checking everything before heading out. As he entered the bustling community center, Marcus was struck by the energy in the air. The room was filled with the sounds of people chatting, organizing, and preparing for the event. Competitors from all walks of life were setting up their stations, each hoping to impress the judges and the crowd. Marcus took a deep breath and began to set up his own station. He arranged his materials with care, his hands moving with the practiced precision of a seasoned driver. As he worked, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. This was where he belonged. The competition began, and Marcus lost himself in the rhythm of the event. He moved with grace and confidence, his creativity shining through in every route he planned. The crowd gathered around his station, watching in awe as he skillfully combined logistics in unexpected ways. As the judges made their rounds, Marcus presented his plans with pride. He explained the inspiration behind each route, sharing stories of his past experiences and his journey in the trucking industry. The judges listened intently, their eyes widening as they reviewed his work. "This is remarkable," one judge exclaimed, unable to hide her enthusiasm. "The routes are so efficient yet perfectly balanced. It's like nothing I've ever seen before." The crowd around Marcus's station grew larger as word spread about his extraordinary skills. People eagerly waited to learn from him, chatting excitedly among themselves about the talented driver they had discovered. Marcus felt a warmth spreading through his chest as he looked out at the sea of smiling faces. For the first time in months, he felt truly seen and appreciated for his skills. The pain and doubt that had plagued him since losing his job at the trucking company began to fade away, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose and hope. As the event drew to a close, Marcus found himself surrounded by well-wishers and new fans. People praised his creativity, asked for advice, and inquired about where they could see more of his work. The positive reception overwhelmed Marcus, filling him with gratitude and joy. As the crowd began to disperse, Marcus noticed a well-dressed woman approaching his station, her keen eyes scanning his materials and a smile playing on her lips. Marcus recognized her immediately. It was Evelyn Wright, one of the city's most respected logistics consultants. "Mr. Hayes," Evelyn said, extending her hand, "I must say, your work today was absolutely extraordinary." Marcus's heart skipped a beat as he shook her hand. "Thank you, Ms. Wright. I'm honored you enjoyed it." Evelyn's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "Enjoyed is an understatement. Your routes tell a story, Mr. Hayes, a story of passion, heritage, and resilience." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. He hadn't expected such a profound understanding of his work. "I've heard about your recent difficulties," Evelyn continued, her voice softening. "It's a shame when talent like yours is stifled by prejudice and narrow-mindedness." Marcus nodded, unable to find words. The memory of his dismissal from the trucking company still stung. But today, Evelyn said, her tone brightening, I saw a driver who refuses to be defined by setbacks. Your creativity and skill deserve a proper showcase, Mr. Hayes. She paused, studying Marcus's face. Have you ever considered starting your own company? Marcus's eyes widened. It's been a dream of mine for years, but nothing. Evelyn interrupted gently. I believe in your talent, Mr. Hayes, and I'd like to help make that dream a reality. Marcus felt as if the ground had shifted beneath his feet. You want to help me start a company? Evelyn nodded, her smile widening. I have connections in the industry, and I'm always on the lookout for fresh talent to support. Your work, your story, they deserve to be shared with the world. Tears welled up in Marcus's eyes as the weight of Evelyn's offer sank in. This was more than just a chance at a new job. It was an opportunity to prove himself, to share his passion on his own terms. Ms. Wright, I don't know what to say, Marcus stammered, overwhelmed by emotion. Evelyn placed a reassuring hand on his arm. Say yes, Mr. Hayes. Let's create something beautiful together. Marcus's hands trembled as he unlocked the door to his apartment, his mind racing, replaying every word of his conversation with Evelyn Wright. As he stepped inside, Angela looked up from her book, her eyes widening at the sight of her husband's flushed face. Marcus, what happened? She asked, setting her book aside. Marcus took a deep breath, trying to steady his voice. Angela, you won't believe it. Evelyn Wright was at the event. Angela's eyebrows shot up. The logistics consultant? What did she say? She wants to help me start my own company, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. Angela's jaw dropped. For a moment, the room was silent. Then she leapt from her seat and threw her arms around Marcus, tears of joy streaming down her face. Oh, Marcus, that's incredible, she exclaimed, her voice muffled against his chest. As they embraced, Marcus felt the weight of the past few months begin to lift. He pulled back slightly, looking into Angela's eyes. It's everything we've dreamed of, but it's also terrifying. What if I'm not ready? Angela cupped his face in her hands, her eyes filled with love and determination. Marcus Hayes, you were born ready. This is your moment. Over the next few days, Marcus and Angela spent every spare moment planning. They sat at their small kitchen table, surrounded by notebooks filled with ideas, sketches of potential company logos, and lists of possible services. What about miles ahead? Angela suggested one evening, tapping her pen against her chin. It represents your experience and your ability to always move forward. Marcus's face lit up. That's perfect, Angela. It's exactly what I want the company to be about. As they worked, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. The pain of his dismissal from the trucking company began to fade, replaced by excitement for the future. With Angela by his side and Evelyn's support, he felt invincible. You know, Marcus said softly one night as they were getting ready for bed, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm almost grateful for what happened with Mr. Huxley. If I hadn't been fired, I might never have had this opportunity. Angela smiled, squeezing his hand. You've always had the talent, Marcus. Now the world is finally going to see it. Evelyn Wright's reputation in the logistics world opened doors that Marcus had only dreamed of before. She arranged a meeting with potential investors at a sleek downtown office, and Marcus found himself standing before a group of well-dressed business people, his hands slightly shaking as he clutched his portfolio. Ladies and gentlemen, Evelyn began, her voice confident and warm, I'd like to introduce you to Marcus Hayes, a driver with extraordinary talent and vision. Marcus took a deep breath and began to speak, his voice growing stronger with each word. He shared his journey, his passion for trucking, and his dream of starting a company that would honor his roots while pushing industry boundaries. As he spoke, Marcus could see the interest growing in the investors' eyes. One of them, a woman with silver hair and kind eyes, leaned forward. Mr. Hayes, your passion is evident. Tell us more about your concept. Marcus's face lit up as he explained his vision for miles ahead. It's a fusion of traditional trucking services with modern techniques, he said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. I want to create a company that reminds people of the reliability of the past while surprising them with new innovations. The investors nodded approvingly, and by the end of the meeting, they had agreed to provide the funding Marcus needed. As they left the office, Evelyn squeezed Marcus's shoulder. "You did it, Marcus. Your dream is becoming a reality." Over the next few weeks, Marcus threw himself into planning. He spent hours in his small apartment at home, sketching out company logos and brainstorming service ideas. Angela often found him there late at night, surrounded by papers, a look of intense concentration on his face. "Try this," he said one evening, offering her a sketch of the new company logo. "It's simple, but it represents everything I want the company to be." Angela's eyes widened as she reviewed the design. "Marcus, this is amazing." Marcus grinned, his chest swelling with pride. He knew he was on the right track. Each decision he made was a piece of his story, a blend of his past and his hopes for the future. As the concept for Miles Ahead took shape, Marcus felt a deep sense of gratitude. He thought of all the people who had supported him: Angela, Evelyn, the investors who believed in him. Their faith in his abilities had given him the courage to move forward. As Marcus's plans for Miles Ahead began to take shape, word of his comeback spread through the city's logistics community. The news traveled fast, reaching the ears of his former colleagues and clients from the trucking company. Many were surprised and delighted to hear that Marcus was making a triumphant return to the industry. One sunny afternoon, as Marcus was reviewing potential locations for his new company, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Sophie, a dispatcher he had worked closely with at the trucking company. "Marcus, I just heard about your new company. I'm so happy for you. You deserve this chance to shine." Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest as he read the message. He hadn't realized how much he had missed the camaraderie of his old team. Throughout the day, more messages poured in from other former colleagues, drivers, mechanics, and even the dispatcher who had always admired Marcus's creativity. Later that week, while Marcus was visiting a potential client, he bumped into Mr. and Mrs. Goldstein, regular clients of the trucking company who had always praised his work. "Marcus, my dear boy," Mrs. Goldstein exclaimed, her eyes twinkling with joy. "We've missed your wonderful service. Is it true you're starting your own company?" Marcus nodded, a shy smile spreading across his face. "Yes, ma'am. It's called Miles Ahead. I'm hoping to launch in a few months." Mr. Goldstein clapped him on the back. "We'll be first in line, son. Your work always had heart. It'll be good to experience it again." The Goldsteins' words stayed with Marcus long after they parted ways. Their enthusiasm and the support from his former colleagues filled him with a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that despite the challenges he had faced, he had made a lasting impact on people through his work. As he continued to work on his company plans, Marcus received an unexpected email from Jean-Luc, the logistics consultant at the trucking company. Jean-Luc offered to help Marcus curate a list of clients for Miles Ahead that would perfectly complement his unique approach. As construction on Miles Ahead began, Marcus found himself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. Every day brought new decisions to make and challenges to overcome. But for Marcus, each obstacle was just another opportunity to pour his heart and soul into his dream. From the crack of dawn to well past sunset, Marcus was on site, overseeing every detail of the company's creation. He worked closely with the architects and designers, ensuring that the office space would reflect the warmth and creativity of his services. "I want the office to feel like home," Marcus explained to the interior designer, his eyes shining with excitement, "but also like an adventure. Can we mix warm wood tones with pops of bright color?" The designer nodded, scribbling notes furiously as Marcus described his vision. Together, they chose rich mahogany desks and vibrant, industry-inspired artwork for the walls, creating a space that was both inviting and inspiring. In the operations center, Marcus was even more hands-on. He meticulously selected each piece of equipment, from state-of-the-art computers to handcrafted ergonomic chairs. Every tool had to meet his exacting standards. "This isn't just about logistics," Marcus told Angela one evening as they reviewed the office plans. "It's about creating an experience. Every route we plan will carry a piece of my story." But bringing his vision to life wasn't without its challenges. Construction delays threatened to push back the launch date, and unexpected costs began to eat into their budget. Marcus found himself up late many nights, poring over spreadsheets and making tough decisions. One particularly stressful day, as Marcus grappled with a shipment of faulty equipment, he felt the weight of his dream pressing down on him. Doubt crept in, whispering that maybe he had bitten off more than he could chew. Just then, his phone buzzed with a message from Evelyn Wright, the logistics consultant who had believed in him from the start. "How's it going, Marcus? Can't wait to see what you're working on." Those simple words of encouragement were enough to reignite Marcus's determination. He squared his shoulders and dove back into the work, tackling each challenge with renewed vigor. As the weeks passed, Marcus's dedication began to pay off. The company slowly took shape, transforming from an idea into a fully operational business that perfectly captured Marcus's vision. As the launch day of Miles Ahead drew near, excitement buzzed through the city's logistics community. Word had spread about Marcus's new venture, and industry professionals eagerly anticipated the services he would offer. Meanwhile, across town, the trucking company was facing a different kind of buzz. The once bustling business now stood eerily quiet on most days. Mr. Huxley paced the office, his face etched with worry as he surveyed the half-empty parking lot. "Where are all our clients?" he muttered to the operations manager, who could only shrug in response. The absence of Marcus's innovative ideas had left a noticeable gap in the company's offerings. Clients who had once raved about the unique routes now complained about the lackluster service. Mr. Huxley's insistence on sticking to traditional methods failed to excite the diverse needs of their clientele. But it wasn't just the service that was driving clients away. The atmosphere in the office had changed dramatically since Marcus's departure. The warmth and camaraderie that had once filled the company had been replaced by a tense, oppressive environment. Staff members worked in silence, afraid to speak up or suggest new ideas for fear of facing Mr. Huxley's wrath. This negative energy seeped into client relations, where customers could sense the discord. The once attentive service became lackluster, and the overall client experience suffered. As weeks passed, the financial strain on the trucking company became impossible to ignore. Mr. Huxley found himself staring at spreadsheets filled with red numbers, his hands shaking as he realized the gravity of the situation. "We can't go on like this," he admitted to himself, the weight of his past actions finally sinking in. Regular clients who had been with the company for years began to seek out new services elsewhere. Logistics consultants who had once praised the company now penned scathing reviews that further damaged its reputation. Mr. Huxley's pride prevented him from acknowledging the root cause of the decline. He blamed the economy, changing industry trends, and even his staff for the company's struggles. But deep down, a nagging voice reminded him of the talented driver he had driven away. The night of the grand opening arrived, and Miles Ahead buzzed with excitement. The company's warm, inviting atmosphere welcomed clients as they streamed through the doors. Marcus stood in the operations center, his heart pounding with anticipation and joy as the first routes were planned and executed. The logistics community had turned out in full force to support him, and the office was packed to capacity. Angela, beaming with pride, moved among the clients, chatting with them and basking in the glow of her husband's success. She caught Marcus's eye through the operations window and gave him a thumbs up, her smile radiant. In the operations center, Marcus worked with a newfound energy, his passion evident in every route he planned. His team, inspired by his leadership and creativity, moved in perfect harmony around him. The atmosphere was electric, filled with laughter and camaraderie, a stark contrast to the tense environment of the trucking company. As the evening progressed, industry consultants and local business leaders arrived, drawn by the buzz surrounding the new company. They reviewed Marcus's work, their eyes widening with each plan. Conversations about the innovative routes and Marcus's inspiring journey filled the air. Across town, Mr. Huxley sat alone in his office at the trucking company, scrolling through social media. His face fell as he saw post after post praising Miles Ahead and its talented owner. Photos of smiling clients and efficient routes flooded his feed. The realization of what he had lost hit Mr. Huxley like a physical blow. He thought of the empty parking lot at his own company, the dwindling contracts, and the mounting bills. The consequences of his actions were becoming painfully clear. Back at Miles Ahead, Marcus stepped out of the operations center to address the crowd. The room fell silent as he spoke, his voice filled with emotion. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he said, his eyes glistening. "This company is a dream come true, and it wouldn't be possible without your support." As weeks turned into months, Miles Ahead continued to flourish. The company became a logistics hotspot, drawing clients from across the city and beyond. Marcus's innovative routes and warm hospitality kept clients coming back for more. Meanwhile, across town, the trucking company was a shadow of its former self. Empty desks and a skeleton staff greeted Mr. Huxley each day as he arrived at work. The once bustling office now stood quiet, a stark reminder of his poor decisions. One evening, as Mr. Huxley sat alone in his office, poring over mounting bills and dwindling bank statements, the reality of his situation hit him hard. Tears welled up in his eyes as he realized he was on the brink of losing everything. His pride and prejudice had cost him not just his best driver, but his entire business. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm him, there was a knock at the door. Mr. Huxley looked up, hastily wiping his eyes, to see Marcus standing in the doorway. Surprise and shame washed over Mr. Huxley's face. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus stepped into the office, his expression a mix of determination and compassion. "Mr. Huxley, I've heard about the company's struggles. I have a proposition for you." Mr. Huxley's eyebrows raised in curiosity and disbelief. After everything that had happened, after all the pain he had caused, Marcus was here offering help. Marcus took a deep breath and continued. "I know we've had our differences, but I believe in second chances. I'm offering to buy the trucking company and incorporate it into Miles Ahead. You would stay on as a consultant, sharing your expertise and helping to blend the best of both businesses." Mr. Huxley sat in stunned silence, overwhelmed by Marcus's unexpected kindness and generosity. The offer was a lifeline he never thought he'd receive, especially from the man he had wronged so deeply. Mr. Huxley stared at Marcus, his eyes wide with disbelief. The man he had once dismissed and mistreated was now standing before him, offering a lifeline. It was almost too much to bear. I don't understand," Mr. Huxley stammered, his voice thick with emotion. "After everything I did to you, why would you want to help me?" Marcus smiled softly, his eyes filled with compassion. "Because holding on to anger only hurts us both. I've learned that forgiveness can be a powerful thing." He stepped closer to Mr. Huxley's desk, his demeanor calm and confident. "This trucking company has a rich history and so much potential. It would be a shame to see it close its doors forever. I believe that together, we can breathe new life into it." Mr. Huxley's shoulders sagged as he let out a heavy sigh. "But how? The company is failing. It's beyond saving." Marcus shook his head, his voice filled with determination. "No company is beyond saving if you have the right people and the right vision. I see an opportunity here to blend the traditional methods that made the trucking company famous with the innovative approach we've developed at Miles Ahead." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "I'm offering to buy out your share of the company, Mr. Huxley, but I want you to stay on as a consultant. Your experience and knowledge are invaluable." Mr. Huxley's eyes widened at the offer. It was more than he could have ever hoped for, more than he deserved. He felt a lump form in his throat as he struggled to find the words to respond. "Marcus, I don't know what to say," he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your offer is incredibly generous, especially considering our history." Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of the moment. "I know it's a lot to take in. Take some time to think about it, but know that this offer comes from a place of respect for what the trucking company once was and what it could be again." Mr. Huxley looked down at his hands, then back up at Marcus. In that moment, he saw not just a talented driver, but a man of incredible character and grace. Humbled and grateful, Mr. Huxley made his decision. I accept your offer, Marcus," he said, his voice filled with a mix of relief and gratitude. "Thank you for giving me and this company a second chance." With the sale finalized, Marcus and Mr. Huxley stood in the operations center of the trucking company. The once bustling space was quiet now, a a stark reminder of how far the company had fallen. Marcus took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the familiar surroundings. "Mr. Huxley," Marcus began, his voice calm and steady, "I have a proposition for you." Mr. Huxley looked up, curiosity and a hint of apprehension in his eyes. "Yes." Marcus smiled softly. "I'd like to offer you the position of head of operations here at the trucking company." Mr. Huxley's eyes widened in surprise. "Head of operations? But I thought, after everything..." Marcus held up a hand, gently interrupting. "The past is behind us. What matters now is the future of this company. Your experience and skill are invaluable, and I believe you can play a crucial role in its revival." He paused, his expression growing serious. "But I want to be clear about something. This company will be run differently from now on. Our focus will be on inclusivity, respect, and creating a healthy work environment for everyone." Mr. Huxley nodded slowly, absorbing Marcus's words. "That means no room for the bias or prejudices that once existed here," Marcus continued. "Every member of our team, regardless of their background, will be valued and given equal opportunities to shine. Can you commit to that?" Mr. Huxley was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the logistic screens. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. "Marcus, I don't deserve this kindness. But if you're willing to give me this chance, I promise to do everything in my power to make things right." Marcus extended his hand. "Then welcome aboard, Mr. Huxley. Let's create something amazing together." As the days passed, Mr. Huxley found himself grappling with his new role at the trucking company. The idea of working under Marcus, a man he had once treated so poorly, filled him with a mix of shame and unease. He couldn't help but feel a twinge of resentment every time Marcus gave him instructions or suggested changes to the operations. One busy evening, as the operations center hummed with activity, Mr. Huxley watched Marcus effortlessly manage the staff. His calm demeanor and encouraging words brought out the best in everyone. It was a stark contrast to his own rigid and authoritarian style of leadership. "Mr. Huxley," Marcus called out, "could you help Samantha with the route for delivery S? She's having a bit of trouble getting it right." Mr. Huxley hesitated for a moment, then nodded and made his way to Samantha's station. As he guided her through the process, he was surprised to find himself enjoying the interaction. The young manager's eyes lit up with understanding, and her gratitude was evident in her smile. "Thank you, Mr. Huxley," Samantha said warmly. "I really appreciate your help." Mr. Huxley felt a warmth spread through his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in the company for a long time. He glanced over at Marcus, who gave him an approving nod. As the weeks went by, Mr. Huxley began to notice changes in himself. He found himself looking forward to coming to work, eager to collaborate with the diverse team Marcus had assembled. The operations center was filled with laughter and camaraderie, a far cry from the tense atmosphere he had once cultivated. One day, as they were planning the routes for an upcoming week, Marcus turned to Mr. Huxley. "What do you think about incorporating some new logistic strategies? I was thinking we could blend some traditional methods with more modern approaches." In the past, Mr. Huxley would have scoffed at such an idea, but now he found himself intrigued. "That sounds interesting," he said, surprising himself. "Perhaps we could start with a twist on the urban delivery routes, using some of the newer technologies." Marcus beamed at him, and Mr. Huxley felt a sense of pride he hadn't experienced in years. He realized that under Marcus's leadership, he was rediscovering his passion for logistics and learning to see the value in new perspectives. As they worked together to create the new route plans, Mr. Huxley found himself fully embracing the company's new ethos. He began to see the strength in diversity, the beauty in collaboration, and the joy in nurturing young talent. As the weeks turned into months, Marcus and Mr. Huxley worked side by side to breathe new life into the trucking company. The process was slow, but their shared dedication began to show results. One sunny afternoon, they sat at a corner desk, surrounded by papers and route drafts. Marcus looked up from his notes, a sparkle in his eyes. "What if we had a section for special deliveries?" he suggested. "It could showcase our ability to handle unique challenges and keep things fresh." Mr. Huxley nodded, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "That's an excellent idea. We could rotate the special deliveries every month, Give our regular clients something new to look forward to. As they discussed the new strategies, Marcus noticed a shift in Mr. Huxley's demeanor. The older manager's face had softened, and there was a newfound enthusiasm in his voice. It was a far cry from the stern, unyielding man he had once been. The staff, too, began to notice the change. The operations center, once a place of tension and fear, now buzzed with positive energy. Managers from diverse backgrounds brought their unique perspectives to the table, creating a fusion of logistic strategies that set the company apart from others in the city. One evening, as the day wound down, Marcus gathered the staff for a meeting. "I want to thank all of you for your hard work," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "We've come a long way, and it's because of your dedication and creativity." Mr. Huxley stepped forward, clearing his throat. "I'd like to say something too," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I know I wasn't the easiest person to work with in the past, but thanks to Marcus's leadership and your patience, I've learned so much. Thank you for giving me a second chance." The room fell silent for a moment, then erupted in applause. Marcus watched as Mr. Huxley's face reddened, a small smile tugging at his lips. As word spread about the changes at the trucking company, curious clients began to return. They were greeted by a warm, inviting atmosphere and a logistic service that surprised and delighted them. The company's reputation began to grow, not just for its services, but for its inclusive and innovative approach to the logistics industry. For Marcus and Mr. Huxley, seeing their vision come to life was deeply rewarding. They often stood side by side in the operations center, working in perfect harmony to create routes that delighted their clients. The mutual respect between them was evident to everyone who watched them work, and it set the tone for the entire company. Marcus's journey, from a wrongfully dismissed driver to a successful company owner, began to capture hearts beyond the city limits. His story of resilience, forgiveness, and triumph over adversity resonated with people from all walks of life. As word spread, local news outlets picked up on the inspiring tale of the trucking company's transformation. One sunny morning, Marcus received a call from a popular morning show. They wanted to feature him in a segment about local success stories. At first, Marcus felt nervous about the idea of being on television, but Angela encouraged him to share his story. The day of the interview arrived, and Marcus found himself sitting under bright studio lights. As the cameras rolled, he spoke from the heart about his experiences. He talked about the pain of discrimination, the struggle to find work, and the unexpected opportunity that changed everything. But most importantly, he emphasized the power of forgiveness and second chances. "I could have held on to anger," Marcus said, his voice filled with emotion, "but instead, I chose to forgive and move forward. And that decision opened doors I never imagined possible." The segment aired, and the response was overwhelming. Marcus's phone began ringing off the hook with messages of support and admiration. People from across the country reached out to share how his story had touched them. Soon, invitations started pouring in. Local business associations asked Marcus to speak at their events. Logistics schools wanted him to address their students, and even a few national conferences expressed interest in having him as a keynote speaker. At first, Marcus felt overwhelmed by the attention. He was just a driver who loved his work, not a public speaker. But as he began accepting these invitations, he realized the impact his words could have. At each event, Marcus shared his experiences with honesty and humility. He spoke about the importance of perseverance in the face of adversity, the value of staying true to one's passion, and the transformative power of forgiveness. His words resonated deeply with his audiences, often leaving not a dry eye in the room. As Marcus stood in the operations center of his flagship company, surrounded by the bustling energy of the staff preparing for another busy day, he took a moment to reflect on the incredible journey that had brought him to this point. The gleaming surfaces and state-of-the-art equipment were a far cry from the small diner where he had once worked, struggling to make ends meet. He glanced out the window, catching sight of the trucking company across the street. The once struggling business now thrived under his and Mr. Huxley's joint leadership. It stood as a testament to the power of forgiveness and second chances. Marcus felt a gentle touch on his shoulder and turned to see Angela, smiling up at him. Lost in thought again? she asked, her eyes twinkling with understanding. He nodded, pulling her into a warm embrace. Just thinking about how far we've come, he said softly. I never could have imagined this when I was fired from the trucking company. As if on cue, Mr. Huxley walked into the operations center, his work shirt crisp and clean. The two men exchanged a nod of mutual respect, their past conflicts long since resolved. We've got a full schedule today, Mr. Huxley announced, a hint of excitement in his voice. And that logistics consultant from the Times is here again. Marcus smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude for the community that had rallied around him in his darkest hour. He thought of the charity event that had reignited his passion, the logistics consultant who had believed in him, and the countless individuals who had supported his dream along the way. As he prepared to start the day's work, Marcus looked around at the diverse faces of his staff, a reflection of the inclusive environment he had worked so hard to create. He realized that his companies were more than just successful businesses. They were beacons of hope, showing that kindness and integrity could triumph over prejudice and adversity. With a deep sense of fulfillment, Marcus picked up his headset and began his day, his heart full of gratitude for the journey that had brought him here. Would you have forgiven Mr. Huxley if you were in Marcus's shoes? Yes or no? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to my channel. I am spending hours upon hours writing these heartwarming stories for you, and your support is what keeps me going.